Welcome to Tech Notice. I've got some good news for you. If you're running Intel Core Ultra 200S series, then you just got yourself a free upgrade. Now, if you're planning to buy this CPU, then you're gonna get it even faster because there's something called Intel Core Ultra 200S Boost. Now, this boost is an overclocking profile, but for the first time, it's different than any of the other profiles because there's some good news. All the downsides that usually come with overclocking, they're not here anymore. So if you are already running Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, 265K or KF, or 245K or KF, I've got some good news for you. Let's talk how it works, how to make it work, and how much performance you're actually gonna get. Let's go. It's so annoying. I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars to just change my Windows wallpaper just because my Windows isn't licensed. Well, why don't you try Hookies? That's a ton cheaper, and if you use the code TN20, you get it even cheaper. What do you mean? How do I get it and how is it possible? Well, see this video here, or the one you're watching? Click in the link on the video description, add the Windows 11 CD product to the cart, proceed to checkout, add the code TN20 for the extra discount. So what, the Windows 11 Pro OEM key is just $23.22? Yeah. Choose the preferred payment option and complete the purchase. The key will be available on the purchased orders in a few moments. Copy the key and paste it into your Windows activation settings, and you're all done. Oh, that was easy. Is that Ryan Gosling? No. Anyway, by the way, the same discount code also works website-wide, so go check out other products, maybe like Microsoft Office. In a minute, I'm going to show you how to enable it. We're actually going to install this. So this is the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K. Interestingly, this doesn't work with the 285KF version for some reason. I don't know why, but the K, it does work. So unlocked, look at this nice retail box. Here it is, this bad boy. I want to start with the good news. Firstly, when Intel said, do you want to retest it? I said, well, do you have some fast RAM kit? Then they managed to get me some. Okay, so this is Vengeance RGB from Corsair, 8000 megahertz, DDR5, 48 gigabytes. Look at this RAM. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. It's really nice chrome look on the side and then obviously RGB on the top. You might be saying 8000 megahertz. I remember you saying that the IMC or integrated memory controller can only run up to 6400 megatransfers per second when it's a CU DIMM, and that's what's changed. So basically, Intel massively underestimated how good the IMC is. And now with the boost clock speed, they're basically saying, look, we support now 8000 megatransfers per second across the board IMC speeds. Now that is good news for any 200S desktop CPU users because this isn't just something that they change, but that means your memory controller is also a lot faster. So I highly recommend just if you want to get faster RAM. There are downsides to some of these things, which we'll talk about later on. So stick around for that because you want to know every single side of this story. Now that is a lot higher than AMD's competition on the side. AMD only supports 5600 megatransfers per second on the Ryzen 9000. That doesn't mean that it can't go faster, but the official spec is 56. This now goes to 8000. Now they're faster than 8000 as well, but that is pretty impressive. And as far as I can read, it also goes for CU DIMM and UDIMM. So whether you have the CU DIMM and pay more or the UDIMM, you should still be able to get 8000 megatransfers per second support for your memory sticks. If you're a creator and you want faster, more capacity RAM, this is super good news for you. Because now you can get 128 gigabytes 2 DIMM kits because we have 64 gigabytes per DIMM. Now you're not going to get it exactly 8000 megahertz, but you can get super big memory kits and quite fast, and you shouldn't have any problem running them on Intel Core Ultra series. Now, before you start writing some of the angry comments, you might be wondering how much is Intel paying me to make this video, and the truth is, they're not. I wish they were, okay? But this is good news, and for creators especially, we need to talk about this. Intel is actually a little bit of an underdog here now in the CPU race because of what happened with the 13th, 14th gen, the degradation of the CPUs. It looks like, AMD is getting the market share. But for creators, in a lot of the applications, as we'll see in a minute, the Core Ultra 9 might still be a better option. The second biggest good news about this profile is this: your warranty stays intact. If you use the Boost profile, there is no change in warranty. You're gonna get still 3 years warranty for your CPU, and most likely it's gonna last a lot longer. Now, there are a few little asterisks. Number one, if you've been previously overclocking and then enable boost, I think you're still gonna get a return, but officially, if you were to sue, Intel kind of says, look, if you overclock it, warranty is gone. That's the same across the board with AMD and anything else. And that even applies when enabling XMP or anything like that. Boom, your warranty goes. There's been cases where they've said, look, my CPU is broken, even though it's been overclocked, they will replace it for you because they know. But it's kind of just this annoying thing that it's on the paper, but really isn't there. But just so you know, Intel or AMD, they don't really have to replace a CPU, even if they're overclocking it. Although a lot of the marketing around the CPUs when they're trying to sell you this thing is that it can be overclocked a lot. It's interesting, isn't it? Now, what about the bad sides and downsides of this profile? Number one, this is not supported on all 200S series CPUs. There are only a few. 285K, that's Ultra 9, Ultra 7, 265K and KF, and then thirdly, Ultra 5 to 45K and KF. So there's only 5 CPUs that is supported for that. Number two, officially Intel says that they don't support 2 DIMMs per channel for the Boost profile. So that means that if you have 4 DIMM sticks, for example, on your motherboard, you usually have 4 DIMM slots. If you enable all of them or have DIMMs on all of them to get 128, 196, 256 gigabytes of RAM as a creator, we need that, right? They say it doesn't necessarily support that. But then the next sentence after that says that regardless, expect people to still get better speeds of RAM when you are running the Boost profile when you have 4 DIMMs installed. Basically what that means is officially they don't promise 8,000 megahertz on all 4 DIMM sticks, or that all of the profile will work across the 4, but you're still gonna get better performance even if you do run 4. And last downside about this is the actual capacity of RAM. Now, if you're looking at the 8,000 megahertz RAM kits, guess what? I can't find a 64 gigabyte kit. Never mind 128 gigabyte kit or 196 gigabyte kit. There just isn't more than 48 gigabytes at the time of me filming this out there. Maybe some manufacturers have announced it, but it's not available to be bought from retailers. So that's a little bit of a downside because as creators, I'd argue 48 gigabytes isn't quite enough. The good news is for my benchmarking, 48 gigabytes shouldn't be a bottleneck. So we can still see how much of a difference does the new Boost profile with the new faster RAM make compared to when we actually tested this earlier. How much performance increase are we going to get? How does that compare to AMD? Are we still better? Can we actually beat the 9950X with this Boost profile overclocking? Let's get this RAM kit actually installed. One of the first things we need to do is go into the BIOS. If you already don't know how to do that, hit the delete button after you start seeing the black screen. Now, I have already checked that the BIOS I need is the 17B. I don't actually know which one this is, so we go to the easy mode. It should show here. Oh, look at that. BIOS version 17B. If you haven't got the latest BIOS, obviously update to that one, then you will see that. But the way this should happen is XMP 1. So if we go to advanced, okay, our XMP for the RAM is on now, 8,000 megahertz. But then look at this Intel 200S boost. All we have to do here is press enabled. It allows you to increase performance in some applications while retaining your CPU warranty. We'll enable XMP with compatible modules up to 8,000. Any speed above will be reduced, and disable any overclocking attempt. But yeah, okay. As you can see, any of the other options kind of went out of the window. Because I'm a creator, we're not going to be manually overclocking this anyway. I'm just going to hit now F10, which means save and exit, and the boost profile should be applied. Next step, once we are on Windows, there is a few things we want to make sure, which is to test if this is actually on and if this is working. Task Manager, looking at the CPU. Okay, there we go. Intel AI Boost. Interesting, everything is Boost or AI. Anyway, this is an NPU. We want to make sure that the RAM is, running 8,000 megatransfers per second, 48 gigabytes. And we do have this all up in here, so we can see what the clock speeds and temperatures and everything is doing. How much power are we actually going to be pulling? Interestingly, PL1 and PL2 are 250 watt limits now. Interestingly, that has changed, because what you're seeing right now is a recording of when I initially tested the 285K. And what you can see here is, firstly, PL1 was 250 and PL2 is 295. So that is the Intel Extreme profile that we had on it. So I'm wondering if the boost is better than the Extreme. We're gonna have to see. But the interesting thing is, if I'm looking at the CPU package power draw, it never went above 255 watts anyway. So it was pulling roughly around that. So I'm wondering, are we reducing some wattages? What's going on in there? I can see that the clock speeds are 4,800 megahertz. So we'll put these side by side so we can actually see what's different. But I thought that's a fascinating discovery to see that this is actually lower than what we have on this boost. On the left side, we've got the boost profile. And then on the right side, we've got the normal profile, what was before. So let's see, what can I see in terms of difference. We can see that the normal profile pulls a little bit more power, 251 watts, whereas when you enable the boost profile, we're around 235. So number one thing, we're pulling less power, which is great. The other thing then is, like, are we getting better score? We'll see that in a minute. In terms of clock speeds, I'm looking here, core clock speeds, the boost profile seems a little bit lower, 4,800 megahertz. Roughly around just under 4,700, whereas the old one was running 4,860. So we extra 100 megahertz, something like that, higher. I think second run, I saw this a little bit higher. So I'm not sure if it kind of uses AI algorithms to boost it higher. Because look at that now. It went over 4.8, and it is higher. So then we're only within 50 megahertz. Now we're about 30 megahertz, as you can saw there. But the old one still seems to be a little bit higher. The die-to-die clock is 3,200 megahertz on the boost clock, whereas on the old one, it's only 2,100. So we're extra 1.1 gigahertz higher. The core effective clock speeds, again, slightly lower than on the other one. We're seeing 4.75 versus 4.8 something. Seems like a little bit lower. Temperatures, roughly about the same. I don't see any difference in there. I didn't do a particularly good thermal paste application because I knew it was going to be fine. But the previous one, I did a very good thermal application. So I think I could get it a little bit cooler if I wanted to get a better contact plate. But I knew it was fine, so I didn't really care that much. In terms of scores, looks like we're scoring within a couple of points, 50 points of each other. Not sure how much difference that is going to make. But let's actually test it in real world applications. Let me run some benchmarks and then come back to you and then actually look at what has changed. Alrighty, I've been testing the Core Ultra 9 285K with the boost profile, and it's time to talk to see if the Core Ultra 9 is really better than AMD and how much performance boost did we actually gain with the new boost version, basically. First, I want to look at the CPU performance. If the pure CPU performance, if they've done something with the clock speeds or anything at all to see if that actually gains anything. Now, officially, they don't say that the clock speeds have gone up. There's just internal, like, die-to-die kind of communication has improved and the memory speed has improved, which for gaming kind of works. But let's have a look at if actual CPU performance, if we get anything extra. And I want to explain the percentages here as well. We're taking the new boost profile as the base profile, so the percentages are calculated against that. But very importantly, I also wanted to ask Intel, because I was a little bit confused. We've got the base, performance, extreme, and now boost profile. We've got 4 Intel profiles for our CPU, and I was like, is the boost going to be superior of all of them, the extreme is lower now than boost. Yes, that is true. With boost, you get the best performance. So if you want the best, go with the boost one. But the interesting thing is, which I'll show you a little bit later, is that the boost actually improves not just the performance, but also efficiency. But first, the Cinebench R24, and we can see that the previous 285K is within 1%. In fact, the multi-core in like a couple of runs, I'm seeing slightly higher, but that's within margin of error, so I don't think there's any difference in there. AMD 9950X in single and multi-core score is actually slower. Looking at Geekbench Sync's, again, CPU performance here, we're seeing that the 285K is slightly slower. So the new boost profile gives you a little bit of increase, but the thing is, I'd say within 2-3%, that's within margin of error, so you're not really going to see anything different. But the 9950X is faster in single core score, 2.3%, but about 9 to 10% slower in the multi-core scores. What about AI? Looking at the Geekbench 6 AI, because I wanted to know if the CPU AI performance has got better, you know. And honestly, single and quantized scores, they're exactly the same. I think I've had some kind of fluke with AMD's half, even though this is calculated, you know, like an average of multiple, but the half on AMD is literally like 4 times as much as on Intel, which is ridiculous. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in there. Has anyone experienced that as well? What's your 9950X Geekbench 6 AI scores? I'd love to know what you're getting. Moving on to Photoshop, an actual real-world application. And I just want to have a little bit of a goal for people who say that Geekbench is not a real-world benchmark. Geekbench is, to me, the best real-world benchmark that actually measures the real-world performance of the Photoshop application or any of the Adobe Creative Cloud, for example, but takes the human error out of the equation. So if you always test something differently, or you have something, oh, let's test this and that, it's always going to be different. Or if you constantly change your tests, you never know how good your actual previous generations of CPUs are. So here we see all the same tests done, and I've done it with multiple different CPUs. You can see which is actually better in the real world. So if you know, adding filters, if you're adding blur, if you know, background detection, whatever, all of these things, then you can see. And I've got some good news. The boost profile does improve it quite a bit. How much of this is actually memory related, I am not sure, but now we're testing it with better memory because obviously memory supports is better. But the 285K previously is about 10.3% slower in the overall scores, and general score is 5.8% slower, and the filter score 14.6% slower. That is literally a generational uplift of just literally boost profile on, boom, you get extra, it's more than 10% extra. If you calculate it the other way, you probably get 10 to 15% performance increase, but the previous generation is 10% slower. Does that make sense mathematically? You all there? AMD, interestingly, is still better at Photoshop. The tables have turned for Photoshop. AMD is one of the best CPUs you can get. In fact, it is, because there is no other option. It's 14% better than the boost profile, but better than what we were previous. The previous was absolute slaughterhouse, but now AMD is still better. Moving on to Lightroom Classic, and this is where I saw the biggest increase. I've got the highest scores ever with the 285K boost with the high frequency RAM as well. The previous generation is about 16.6% slower. That's just like literally going from, I don't know, Ultra 7, they get actually even Ultra 7 to Ultra 9 isn't that big of a boost. You just got like an extra tier of Ultra 11 or something like that. It's really, really big jump in there. So if you're a photo editor, definitely add the boost on. AMD is getting quite a big of a whooping here. Interestingly, the 9950X is not as good for Lightroom Classic. So interesting, Photoshop, AMD, Lightroom Classic, Intel, if that makes sense. Moving on to video editing and Premiere Pro, here's where I'm seeing some really weird and odd things. So firstly, looking at the overall scores, extended and standard overall scores, we're getting a little bit of a boost, I would like to say. The standard overall score, as you can see, is 3% slower on the 285K, you know, non-boost. But then there's some other really weird things going on. Look at the long GOP score. The new boost profile is significantly lower. The previous one is 28, almost 30% faster. That to me shows that there's some kind of an issue with either the driver, like we're not really reading anything from like the iGPU and QuickSync. Is it not working properly? Weirdly, I did the test over and over again, updated the driver, I'm still getting the same result. So I'm not sure Intel what you did there, but you unboosted your long GOP performance there. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. That's really, really odd. At the same time, interframe, so when we work with ProRes, for example, is quite a bit faster. We're getting 15% slower on the previous thing, so that's quite a big of a uplift there. And GPU effects, again, 7 to 10% increase, roughly, which is interesting again. But long GOP score, that to me is a big letdown, because that's why you would mainly get the Intel CPU, because it's very good at that. Now, in fact, the AMD 9950X is better at the long GOP scores, which makes absolutely no sense to me, because, you know, QuickSync should always be better. So if we got the QuickSync working there as well, we can get extra, you know, 15 to 20%, I think, overall improvement of all of the scores. Because let's say we got the same scores as the long GOP of the previous one, we would be faster than the 9950X. So basically, if we had the long GOP working in Premiere Pro, you can see compared to the 9950X, it would be better in every single aspect of it. Literally, just that would be really amazing. Moving on to DaVinci Resolve, and here we can see a little bit of a better situation, but same issues as well. So overall scores, you can see 10 to 12% slower on the previous non-boosted profile. Bear in mind that the non-boosted profile is not like Intel Basic. This is Intel Extreme Profile, the best one that was previously possible. It's basically better in every single aspect. The big performance there is Fusion score, massively increased. I guess the RAM there makes a big difference. AI there as well. Interestingly, if you look at the long GOP scores, we're getting a little bit of a boost. So previous non-boost is 17% slower, but still that is not enough to actually beat AMD. And we know that in long GOP scores, Intel should be a lot faster encoding, decoding, playing back, QuickSync. It just should work. But AMD is a little bit better. Is it because DaVinci Resolve can't fully utilize QuickSync and doesn't know whether we should use like the GPUs decoding or encoding or the CPUs? We don't know. But still, generally for video editing, Intel is still better than the 9950X. Moving on to 3D, we're getting a little bit of a decrease in performance. The previous non-boost is about 3% faster in the monster scene, slightly slower in the juncture scene, but around 5% faster in the classroom scene. AMD, again, is faster than any of them, really, so AMD is better at that. So Intel does get a beating in here. V-Ray, 285K previous non-boost is about 1% faster, and the 9950X about 4.6% faster. So in 3D, looks like AMD is still king, and the best news comes in a minute for AMD. But we didn't get really anything boosted here compared to the non-boost versus boost in 3D. That makes sense. But we're going to talk about power consumption, because this is another thing that Intel didn't mention anywhere, but I'm seeing a massive increase. So when I tested the extreme profile of Intel 285K, we're seeing roughly around 253 watts pulled from the socket. With this boost profile now enabled, I'm getting 236 watts pulled from the socket. That is quite a big difference. We're seeing roughly around 17 watt difference. That's huge. So the boost should actually make your CPU even more efficient. And that's the good news from the earlier part of the video, that is not just going to give you extra performance, but it's also making it more efficient. So it's going to cost less to run, and it's just better in every single way. Now AMD is still efficiency king, because if you look at them, they're extra 36 watts lower in terms of max power consumption, which is pretty insane. I do have one last little asterisk that I'm just wondering. For this particular CPU test, I tested a different sample of the same CPU. So I'm wondering if the power consumption is because of the sample difference, because I mean, there shouldn't really be that big of a power draw difference, but in terms of boost, that should be all in there. So, conclusion then, is the boost good? The boost is good, it's very good, and I'm glad that you got just free performance difference for you as a creator. We're basically getting extra generational leap in performance. If you are already using 285K, go to the BIOS, update the drivers, and then enable boost. Even if you go from extreme to boost, you should be lowering power draw and then increasing performance. So for photo editing, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Photoshop, AMD still wins, but for Lightroom Classic, huge performance increase. For video editing, Intel is still better, and we're getting quite a bit of a boost as well. Just bear in mind with the long GOP scores, if any of you are using the 285K, I'd love to know what your long GOP scores, so H.264 and 5 scores and you know, working with the media is like. Do you see any issues or whatever? I'd love to know what's there. In 3D, you're not gonna get any performance increase whatsoever, so no real difference in there. But if you're doing 3D, I'd still recommend upgrading to the boost, because it's just the power consumption goes low, and you know, paying less for electricity is still a good thing. Okay, if you found this helpful, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to reach out to me, I'll always get back to my next messages within 24 hours. Want to build yourself best bang for buck, create a PC? There's some free build guides in the description below. Go check them out and build yourself something amazing. Okay, thanks for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.